All right, and welcome back to Better Understanding the Bible. I'm your host, Alice, and let's get to it. In this episode, Introduction to the Kingdom of Eden, Understanding the Context of Genesis Through Prophetic Language and the Motifs of Genesis, Part 2. Imagery. Imagery is the use of vivid or figurative language to represent objects, actions, or ideas and to appeal to our senses. The lake was left shivering by the touch of the morning wind. He could never escape from the iron grip of desire. He could hear the footsteps of doom nearing, and the pot was as red as a tongue after eating a cherry-flavored ring pop. Darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was over the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and God separated it from the darkness. For God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. The heaven, the earth, and the sea, the three parties the heaven and earth covenant are concerned about. Now we're going to read Genesis and appeal to the primer that is in Genesis and the basis for prophetic language. A lot takes place in Genesis 1. We see a lot of things being identified, being named, being renamed, being structured in an order, and creating some kind of images as it goes through, relating to things that we are all well aware of as natural phenomenons in this world. So let's take a read of this and put it together so that we can hear what it's saying, make a sense of all the use of these words and the renamings so that we can get a picture of what we're looking at. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the faces of the water, and he said, "Let there be light." God separated the light from the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So in day one, we already get renamings. We get, "Let there be light," and God called that light day. We have the darkness over the face of the deep, which is the sea, and that's what was called night. We also have God being present, hovering over the face of the waters. So a lot of stuff is being said here and established. We also then have a response to this situation in day 2, where God says, "Let there be an expanse or a firmament in the midst of the waters," so in the middle of the waters. And now let it separate the waters from the waters, which is interesting. And it goes on to say, God made the expanse, the firmament, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above. So now we have this image given to us of waters above, waters below, with a firmament or a divider between the two. That divider, that firmament, was called heaven. So now we have that being named. So now we have day and night being used with light, darkness, and light. We have the expanse, the firmament is heaven. We have the division of the waters. And now in verse 9, we have let the waters under the heavens. So now there was the waters above, and now waters below. Now the waters below under the heavens are to be gathered into one place, and dry land will appear. So that means the waters were covering the land. So the waters under the heavens were gathered then into one place, and as a result of the gathering together, the land that was under them it became dry, and it appeared. And it was so. So God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called the seas. So now we have 3 groups identified. We have the heavens, that's where, then we also have the earth, and we also have the seas. Then we also see this added into the mix, where we actually see some of this language now already being applied, but being still part of the construction. In Genesis 1:14, it says, "Let there be lights to separate the day from the night, to give light on the earth." And God made 2 great lights to rule the day, and the lesser to rule the night. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and the night, to separate from the light and the darkness. So we got a lot of the similar language that we just read that was just established only just a few verses before. So to help bring this all together, so we have the darkness, we have the above, the below, we have the light being called day, the darkness being night, we have the waters with the darkness over them. So let's just put this all together, the dry land being called earth, and let's map this out. And that's what I've done here. So this is the God created the heavens and the earth, the covenant. We can see this primer being added in Genesis 1:5, light being called day, darkness night, expanse or the firmament being called heaven, the dry lands called earth, the waters are called seas. We also see that when we map this out, we get the waters above, the waters below, and the waters below in this image have been drawn to the waters, and the dry land has appeared. Now we have the comparison because the waters below, creating the dry land below. And what do we have? We have the night, the darkness, which is death. And we have the waters being associated to that as darkness was on the face of the waters. Now these waters were called the seas. And so the darkness was on the face of the seas, and the darkness was called night. And the lesser light was to rule the night. So that's very interesting. The lesser light is to rule them, to have authority over top of it, to dominate them. The waters now, according to Revelations, have already been identified in the book of Revelation by John, and he says that the waters, from the angel that gave him interpretation, said the waters are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So we've been over this before in past videos, so we're going to apply that understanding, because here we have the seas are the waters, the peoples, and then multitudes and nations and tongues. And then on the dry land side, the day, the light, and the life, well, that's called earth. And how come we would say light with the earth? Well, that's because the waters, when we take a look at the firmament and the waters above, well, that's where the lights were put into the firmament, and they shine the light onto the earth, the dry land. So the earth got the light, and the dry land got the day, life aspect added to it, which we've already looked into, the promised land, God's covenant people, the tribes and nations, the kingdom of God being associated to the dry land or the earth. So we get the image of the waters above, that's God in heaven. We have below, where we get the waters, the seas, and the peoples, the multitudes, and the tongues. We also get the dry land, which is the people of God. And we get a divider between God and then the heavens between the earth. And the waters have no connection to it, which is pretty interesting. So this imagery, this language has been built into the first few verses of Genesis. Now, when we take a look at this language, and I say that this is the primer for prophetic language, well, when we take a look at these things, these items, and as this grows, we're going to take a look at the Temple of Solomon, because there's some pretty interesting imagery that gets translated into here as well. So, for example, let's start with number 1, 2, and 3, the porch, the holy place, and the Holy of Holies. So here we have the Solomon's porch, where you enter into the tabernacle, where then you go into the holy place, where we have the lampstands and the showbread. We also have the table of incense, and this is where the Levites, the priesthood, they would do their Levitical duties and serve the Lord, and only them were allowed to go in there. And then the high priest, once a year, would go into the Holy of Holies for the shedding of blood and the remission of sin for the holy people. Now, when we take a look over here, we get the brazen altar and the molten sea, the A and the B. So interesting, we have the brazen altar, and B, we have the molten sea. In the back here, we have the Ark of the Covenant and the cherubim all set up around it for those who are familiar with this. So here we have the look of the temple. We have the place where the workers of God, and we also have the altar of sacrifice. And that's what we were looking up here in A. The altar of sacrifice, while the priest approaches the the priest approached the tabernacle by the way of the brazen altar, where he would offer sacrifices for sin. As Leviticus 17:11 explains, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh atonement for the soul." And the brazen altar was the place for the sacrifice and the shedding of blood. The molten sea, interestingly, the molten sea or the brazen sea was a large basin in the Temple of Jerusalem made by Solomon for the ablution of the priests. So when we take a look at that, we actually get the heavens, the place of God, where God was present in the Holy of Holies, where he was in the presence of the bread of presence represented in the inner sanctuary, the holy place. And this is where the Levitical priesthood, the workers of God, the people in that had the special right to enter into the presence and to the things and to the knowledge and to do the works of God. Then we have the bronze altar where the sacrifice is made for the people of God so that their sins would be atoned. And this is where we have the burnt offerings, the dry earth, the dry land. And interestingly enough, across from the bronze altar, in directions in Exodus and Kings and Chronicles, we have the sea basin, the metal basin, actually called the sea. So we have the heavens, the earth, and the sea. Deuteronomy 31, we get Moses handing the law. This is the creation of the law, and he is talking to God and about basically to come to the end of his days. And God says to Moses, when you go down, when you pass on, these people are going to betray me, and they're going to forsake me and break my covenant. So God told Moses to write down the words of a song to teach the Israelites so that it could be in their mouths and a witness against them for all time, saying, "Don't do these things, or this shall come upon you." So Deuteronomy 31 records this, starting in verse 30 and then transitioning into Deuteronomy 32. Then Moses spoke the words of this song until they were finished in the ears of all the assembly of Israel. Now pay close attention to that line. Then Moses spoke the words into the ears of Israel. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak. Give ear, I will speak. The words of this song, give ear, the ears, O heavens of Israel. And let the earth hear the words of my mouth. And let the earth, Israel, hear the words of this song, hear the ears. So here we have, give ear, hear the words, O heavens and earth, I will speak the words of my mouth, let them hear. It's just the identifying factor of Israel directly being called the heavens and the earth. And that's exactly what we have with this judgment against them. For God has said to Moses, this people, Israel, will rebel against me. Now teach them the song. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. The words of this song, the ears of Israel. Give ear, hear the words of my mouth. I will speak, O heavens, O earth. Give ear, O heavens and earth. But the seas are the darkness, right? You see, the seas are in the darkness, they're in the night. They're outside of the covenant of God. They're not part of the covenant of God. That's why they're not included. That's why the sea and the waters, the sea wasn't mentioned, because they weren't part of the agreement of Israel. of the covenant people. They were outside of that. Therefore, this is in charge only to the covenant people, the heavens and the earth, Israel. Now it continues, interestingly, with the same imagery language. May my teaching drop as the rain, may my speech distill as the dew, like gentle rain upon tender grass, like showers upon the herb. Now pay very attention to that. So give ear, O heavens, I will speak, and hear the words of my mouth. Why? Because my teaching will drop as the rain. Well, here we have in Genesis 2, before Adam is created, it says, when no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. And here we have God saying, my teaching, if you listen to me and hear the words of my mouth. Why? That my teachings would drop as the rain. And here we have in Genesis 2, the Lord had not caused it to rain. And here we have saying, may my teachings drop as the rain, like gentle rain upon the tender grass and the herbs. And here we have no bush of the field or no small plant had yet sprung up. So here the rain is being used as an image of the knowledge of God poured out onto the grass and the herbs, which are Israel. And here we have the grass and the herbs of the field not established yet. They had not sprung up yet because there was no rain yet. Just as we see here, the establishment of the tender grass and the herb, because the rain was coming, because the law covenant was established. It's very interesting as this continues. It says, a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, from the dust of the ground, from the dry land. As we see at the top here, where it says, no bush of the field was yet in the land. Well, that's the dry land from Genesis 1:2, where we have the seas, the waters, but then the waters in 1:10, the waters were pulled to the side and the dry land appeared. And God planted in the Garden of Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Now, interestingly, a river flowed out of Eden and watered to the garden. And a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. And now here we have Eden watering the garden, and then the garden actually waters the nations surrounding Eden. For the first was the Pishon, and the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah. And then we get the second river, which is the Gihon, which is one that flowed around the whole land of Cush. And then the next one was the third river, the Tigris, which flows east of Assyria, and the fourth, which is the Euphrates. So here we have Eden, and then we have the garden placed in Eden, right, to the east of Eden, and the garden watered the nations. Now this is very important to understand. The water flowed out of Eden, flowed into the garden, and then from the garden it watered the nations. And the reason why I say that is because in Revelation 22, we're talking about the New Jerusalem, which is akin to the Garden of Eden, as we read, the river of the water of life flowing from the throne of God through the middle of the city, also on either side of the river, and the leaf of the tree was the tree of life, and the tree of leaves of the tree of life were for the healing of the nations. So here we have the idea of the New Jerusalem coming down, just as we have the idea of Eden, and then we have Eden with the garden. We have the idea of Israel with Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem coming down out of heaven is the Garden of Eden. And inside the city we have the river of life, the water of life flowing from the throne of God. So we have the throne of God, and coming out of the throne of God is the water of life, which then goes through the tree of life, Jesus, and it heals the nations. Jesus is the New Jerusalem, the garden. It's very interesting because we also get in Isaiah the Lord saying that the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. So we get that same imagery. And we get God identifying as the waters above. So we see that same language being applied not only in Genesis, but all the way through in the same idea of Eden as in the restored Eden of Revelation 22. We also see in John 4:14 that whoever drinks of the water that Jesus will give him shall never thirst, but the water that Jesus will give him will be a well of water springing up to everlasting life. So the water is associated to the life, to the everlasting life. Truly, truly, I say unto you, unless one is born of the water and of spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God without being born from above. For he who comes from above is above all. For he who is of the earth is from the earth, and speaks of the earth. For he who comes from heaven is above all. And that's why this language is very important to understand, because that's what we just saw. We have the heaven above, the waters above, the waters of life that flow from the heaven above onto the dry land to give it life, to give it light, separated from the darkness. It's very fascinating to see, and to see how that even the Hebrews themselves clearly see this as it is established in the tabernacle of Moses and the tabernacle of David, and then even in the temple of Solomon, and all the way to the temple of Herod. These symbols and these concepts were highly understood and part of the day-to-day life of the Hebrew. Solomon made all the vessels that were in the house of the Lord, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the south and 5 on the north, before the inner sanctuary. Then you shall make its lamps 7 in number, and they shall mount its lamps as to shed light on the space in front of it. Just as in Genesis 1, let there be lights to give light upon the earth. And just as we see in the heavens, that's where the lampstands are set, to give light upon the earth, to shed light in the space in front of it. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands one like the Son of Man. I am the first and the last, the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. As for the mystery of the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. And who are the 7 churches? Well, they're the ones who received the promises. They're the ones that were the fulfillment of covenant. They are the chosen generation, a royal priesthood, the holy nation, and peculiar people. That is the fulfillment of the Exodus covenant, the great kingdom covenant fulfillment, where it said, if you were obedient and faithful, if you will obey my voice and be true to the covenant, then you will be a peculiar people above all others, a royal priesthood and a holy nation. And here we have Jesus's followers, the ones who are the 7 churches, the 7 lampstands. And what does he say? He says that to him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Then he said to them, you are the light of the world. Then he told them, go and let your light shine before men, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Just as Genesis 1 established, let there be lights to give light upon the earth. Even Jesus' kingdom has messengers of the light on the earth, to the Hebrew first, then to the Gentile. It's absolutely fascinating to see the fulfillment of these things being walked out even in the times of Jesus, with the same light, language, the same motif, the same imagery. And we get that all buried right in the Genesis 1, all the way through Scripture, all the way through the culture, and even in the temple itself. We have the above and the below, the waters above and the waters below. And the waters below, well, they were separated and they were put into one place, and the dry land appeared because the waters were pulled off. They were gathered into one place, and they were called the sea. Then they were divided by a firmament. They weren't allowed above that. They were divided. This below was divided from the above, the heavens, the place where God was. They were not allowed access in. Only the lights that were placed in the firmament could go and shine light on the earth. And they were allowed, only the high priest, the brightest light on the firmament, was allowed to go into God's presence, which was the waters above, that it could flow out. And thus, those who were below were always looking up into the heavens above for their redemption, and the sea was in darkness, cast off. And we can see that this is all Genesis 1 through 18. The Genesis primer, which established prophetic language, the idea of the creation and how the covenant is established and how it was played out and established in the culture, in the life, in the language, even in the temple. And this was the mind of the Hebrew covenant, heaven and earth. The heavens and the earth, God saw all that he made, and behold, it was good. The heaven, the earth, and the sea, the three parties the heaven and earth covenant are concerned about. Revelation 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. God be blessed and praised, for the new kingdom has come. If you enjoy the work that I do and would like to support me, you can easily do so through PayPal at the address here on the screen. And I'd just like to say that I hope you understand what I'm putting forward here. This is just one of the deep layers of information that's heavily embedded in through Genesis. As we come to start unpacking these, we're going to be getting into a lot of heavy understanding and challenging a lot of concepts, looking at the understanding that there's a lot more going on in these things than what we might have once previously looked at them as. Now, as we move forward, we're going to continue to apply these layers together and develop heavier themes and ask deeper questions and expand this, for Genesis has a lot to offer us so that we can better understand the Bible. Wherever you are, I hope this finds you well. God bless.